The lake was silent, until it wasn't. One crack, sharp as a gunshot, split the air. Emily's scream echoed as the ice gave way, swallowing her into the black water. Daniel lunged, but the freezing current dragged her under too fast. And then came a blur of fur and fury, Shadow, the shepherd, hurling himself into the hole without hesitation. The soldier could only watch as his dog vanished into the dark, chasing the child the ice had claimed. The lake had been frozen for weeks, a glassy white expanse that looked solid enough to hold the world. Kids skated across it by day, their laughter bouncing off the hills. Adults crossed it at night, boots crunching on its surface, trusting the ice the way people trusted the sunrise. But Daniel never fully trusted it. A soldier learned early that silence and stillness could be dangerous, that beneath calm surfaces, fractures waited. He watched Emily run ahead that evening, her red scarf trailing like a banner against the gray sky, and his gut tightened. Shadow trotted at his side, ears twitching, nose lowered as if he, too, felt the warning. "Stay close to the shore," Daniel called, his breath hanging in the freezing air. Emily waved back, her laugh bright and careless. She was young enough to believe the world would always hold her. Then came the sound. A crack, sharp, echoing, wrong. The kind of sound that made the hair on Daniel's neck rise. Emily stopped mid-step. Her boots slid an inch on the ice. She looked down, eyes wide. A spider web of fractures spread beneath her feet, lightning fast, lines splitting in all directions. "Don't move!" Daniel roared, already sprinting forward. The ice gave way. Emily screamed as the surface shattered, swallowing her into blackness. One moment she was there, framed against the pale sky, and the next she was gone, yanked under by the freezing current. Her scarf floated for a heartbeat, then vanished too. Daniel hit the edge of the hole seconds later. The water boiled with bubbles, shards of ice knocking against his hands. He dropped to his knees, plunging his arms in, clawing at the darkness. Nothing. Just cold that bit to the bone instantly, a current that pulled down and away. "Emily!" His voice cracked, torn by panic. He shoved his face closer, searching, but the water was opaque, blacker than night. And then, motion. A blur. Shadow. The shepherd had launched himself past Daniel, straight into the hole. His body hit the water with a splash, fur flattening instantly, tail vanishing beneath the surface. One heartbeat he was there, the next he was gone, swallowed by the same darkness that had taken Emily. "Shadow!" Daniel bellowed, his hands clawing at the ice edge, fighting the instinct to dive after them both. His training screamed at him, soldiers didn't dive blind, didn't throw themselves into traps. But this wasn't combat. This was worse. This was family. The water churned, and Daniel leaned dangerously over the edge, eyes scanning the black swirl. Seconds stretched like lifetimes. His lungs ached just imagining what Emily's must feel like, what Shadow's must endure. Then a shape surged upward, dark fur, flailing limbs, a muffled cry. Shadow's jaws locked tight on fabric, Emily's red scarf clenched in his teeth. Her face broke the surface, pale, lips blue, but alive. Daniel lunged, arms plunging into the freezing water, locking around her shoulders. He hauled her up, dragging her onto the ice, kicking shards away. Shadow scrambled after, paws clawing at the edge until Daniel's free hand gripped his harness and yanked him onto solid ground. For a moment, all three lay gasping on the ice, man, child, and dog, steam rising from their bodies into the frozen air. Emily coughed, water spilling from her lips, her small body shaking violently. Shadow pressed against her instantly, his soaked fur plastering warmth to her frozen skin, his chest heaving with each ragged breath. Daniel bent over them both, his own chest burning with relief. He pressed his forehead to Emily's hair, his hand tangling in Shadow's wet ruff. "You found her," he whispered. His voice shook. "You brought her back." But the lake groaned around them, cracks stretching wider, as though the ice wasn't finished yet. The fight to keep her alive had only just begun. Emily coughed violently, water pouring from her mouth in weak spurts. Her body shook in uncontrollable spasms, tiny hands clawing at Daniel's soaked jacket as though she were trying to climb inside him for warmth. Her lips were purple, her skin a frightening shade of gray, and her eyes rolled back for a moment before flicking open again. "Stay with me, Emily," Daniel said, his voice a low growl meant as much for himself as for her. He pulled her closer against his chest, wrapping his arms tight, trying to share his heat. The cold of her soaked clothes bit through him like knives, but he ignored it. Shadow pressed in close, water streaming off his black fur, steam rising where his body heat met the air. His breathing was ragged, his flanks heaving, but his focus never wavered from the girl. He licked her face, whining low in his throat, nudging her cheek until her eyes fluttered open again. But the lake groaned beneath them, the sound like bones breaking under pressure. Cracks spidered outward from the hole, spreading toward them. Daniel's instincts screamed, "Move. Now." He shifted Emily higher in his arms, hooking her against his chest, and staggered upright. His legs felt like stone, weighed down by water that had soaked through his trousers and boots, turning them into anchors. Every step threatened to send him crashing back into the freezing dark. "Shadow, heel!" Daniel barked, and the shepherd instantly fell into step beside him, pressing against his thigh to steady him. The dog's weight was a counterbalance on the slick surface, a reminder that he wasn't moving alone. The shore looked impossibly far. What had been a short walk minutes ago now stretched like miles of glass ready to shatter. Each groan of the ice made his pulse spike. Emily whimpered against his chest. Cold, her voice was faint, broken. "I know, kiddo. I know," Daniel whispered, his breath steaming in the air. "We're going to get you warm. Just hold on a little longer." His boots slipped once, sending him crashing to one knee. The impact jolted through his body, Emily's head lolling dangerously. Panic surged. Shadow immediately shoved against his arm, steadying him, growling as if scolding him for daring to falter. Daniel forced himself up, teeth gritted. "I'm not stopping," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. The wind cut sharper the closer they came to the bank, snow whipping across the ice in thin sheets that stung his face. The world blurred to 3 points, Emily's trembling breath, Shadow's steady form, and the shoreline that never seemed to draw closer. At last, the ice shifted beneath them with a sound like a rifle crack. A massive fissure split just feet behind them, water bubbling upward in a jagged black line. The lake was collapsing under its own weight. If they hesitated, they'd be dragged back under. Daniel surged forward, every muscle burning, the weight of the child in his arms both anchor and fuel. Shadow sprinted ahead now, barking furiously at the shoreline, tail high like a banner guiding him forward. The bank rose at last, a ridge of snow and reeds solid under his boots. Daniel lunged onto it, nearly collapsing, dragging Emily against his chest. Shadow scrambled up beside him, then immediately pressed against the girl, curling his body around her as if to shield her from the wind itself. Daniel fell to his knees in the snow, gasping. His chest felt like fire, his arms numb from cold and strain. He lowered Emily carefully, checking her face, watching her chest rise and fall in shallow, stuttering breaths. Alive, but barely. He pulled off his outer jacket, wrapping it around her soaked body, then pressed her back against his chest, covering both with Shadow's heat as the shepherd lay half across her small form. The dog's fur steamed in the bitter air, his eyes locked on Daniel as if asking the question neither dared speak, "What now?" Daniel looked down at Emily, at her pale lips and trembling eyelids. He clenched his jaw. "Now we run," he said quietly. "We get her warm, or the ice wins anyway." Shadow's tail thumped once in agreement, his body pressing closer to the girl. The storm wasn't done, the night wasn't merciful, but neither was their will to fight. The lake was behind them now, but the fight was far from over. Snow whipped across the frozen ground in blinding gusts, each flake like a shard of glass against Daniel's face. The bank felt solid beneath his boots, but the ground ahead stretched into a wasteland of white, no clear road, no clear path, only a storm eager to erase every trace of direction. Emily trembled violently in his arms, her breath shallow, lips still tinted blue. The jacket he had wrapped around her was already stiff with ice, offering only the faintest shield against the cold. Daniel held her tighter, pressing her to his chest, whispering with a soldier's steady voice even as fear dug its claws into him. "Stay awake, Emily. Don't you close your eyes. I need you to fight. You hear me? Fight." Her lashes fluttered, her small head nuzzling weakly against his chest, but she didn't answer. Shadow stayed pressed against his side, fur matted and soaked, steam rising from his body. His ears twitched constantly, alert, scanning the storm as though searching for threats no human could see. Daniel forced his legs into motion. The firehouse was 2 miles east, but in a storm like this it might as well have been 10. His body screamed from exhaustion, his arms numb from holding Emily, but he didn't let himself falter. Each step was a mission: keep moving, keep her alive, trust the dog. Shadow surged ahead, paws sinking into the snow with every bound. His nose cut through the air, weaving side to side, following scents Daniel couldn't hope to track: smoke, people, warmth. Twice he paused, barking sharply, signaling Daniel to adjust his course. Each time, Daniel trusted him without hesitation. Minutes blurred into an endless march. The world narrowed to the sound of the wind and Emily's fragile breaths. When her body twitched violently in another shiver, Daniel stopped long enough to crouch low, shifting her under his coat. The heat of his chest pressed into her, and for a moment he felt her breath steady again. Shadow immediately circled them, curling tight against Emily's exposed side, his body acting as a shield against the wind. Daniel closed his eyes briefly, forehead pressed against her damp hair. "Hold on, kiddo. We're almost there. Shadow won't let you go." But when he opened them again, he realized the storm had grown even thicker. Visibility shrank to mere feet, the world collapsing into a spinning tunnel of white. Panic threatened to surge, but Shadow's bark cut through, steady, commanding. The dog bounded toward a cluster of dark shapes barely visible through the blizzard: trees, maybe, or a shed. Shelter. Daniel followed, staggering through the drifts until the outlines sharpened. A collapsed barn, its roof sagging under the weight of snow, but its walls still standing. Shadow pawed furiously at the doorframe, barking until Daniel pushed forward, shouldering through the snow-packed entrance. Inside, the air was still bitter, but the wind was muffled, the snow no longer biting at their skin. Daniel laid Emily carefully on a pile of old hay, stripped off his soaked gloves, and began rubbing her arms and legs, forcing circulation back into her limbs. She whimpered weakly, her eyelids fluttering, but the sound was enough to ignite his determination again. Shadow shook violently, spraying water across the dark space, then pressed his body against Emily's once more, his eyes never leaving her. His breaths came in heavy pants, but he refused to back away even an inch. Daniel pulled off his own undershirt, wrapping it around her beneath the jacket, layering anything he could find from the barn, old tarps, scraps of cloth, over her small form. He cupped her face with trembling hands, whispering, "Just a little longer. We'll move again when you're ready. You're not leaving us tonight." For a long moment, the only sounds were the storm outside, the soldier's ragged breathing, and the dog's steady panting. Emily's chest rose, faint but steady, and Daniel's chest loosened with relief. He leaned back against the wall, one arm still cradling her, the other resting on Shadow's back. "You saved her once already," he whispered to the shepherd. "Don't stop now." Shadow blinked slowly, leaned into his hand, and lowered his head back onto Emily's chest. He wasn't stopping. Not until she was safe. The barn gave them moments, nothing more. A pocket of stillness carved out of the storm's fury, enough for Daniel to catch his breath, enough for Emily's trembling to ease slightly. But he knew what the medics would say if they saw her like this. Minutes mattered. Every tick of the clock was another degree stolen by the cold. Emily lay wrapped in tarps and cloth, her head against his chest, her skin clammy under his palm. Her breaths came shallow, punctuated by soft whimpers. Shadow's body curled against her side, his soaked fur steaming in the barn's stillness, his warmth pouring into her like a living furnace. His amber eyes never left her face. Daniel leaned back against the wall, shutting his eyes for just a second. Fatigue pressed down on him like a physical weight. His arms ached, his legs screamed from the trek across the ice, and his skin burned where frostbite had bitten. But soldiers didn't rest when the mission was unfinished. And this mission was clear: get Emily to the firehouse, no matter what it cost. He opened his eyes and looked at Shadow. The dog lifted his head, ears pricking, as if sensing his thoughts. Daniel gave a short nod. "We move." Emily stirred weakly when he adjusted her in his arms. "Cold," she whispered, her voice so faint he had to bend close to hear it. "I know, kiddo," he murmured, pressing his lips to her damp hair. "But Shadow and we're gonna get you warm. You just hold on a little longer." Shadow barked once, sharp and decisive, then bounded to the door, pawing at it until snow sifted in through the cracks. He was ready. Daniel shifted Emily tighter against him, wrapped in layers of fabric in his own jacket, then pushed the barn door open with his shoulder. The storm screamed back to life instantly, slamming into them with icy claws. Snow stung his face, wind howled in his ears, but he didn't falter. The firehouse lay east, he could almost see its outline in his mind, lit by the glow of floodlights and the promise of survival. Shadow led the way, a black blur against the white, barking occasionally to guide Daniel through the featureless drifts. The world was reduced to noise and cold, but the dog carved a path, nose buried in the wind, tail stiff with determination. Every step was agony. Daniel's thighs burned, his boots felt like lead, and his arms were so numb he feared he might lose his grip on Emily. But he clutched her tighter, whispering to her with every breath. "Stay with me. Don't sleep. Think about your mom waiting. Think about Shadow." Her head shifted faintly against his chest. That was enough. Shadow suddenly stopped ahead, barking furiously, paws digging at a mound of snow. Daniel staggered closer and saw it, a fence post jutting from the drift, wood splintered but solid. They were near the road. Relief surged in his chest, almost enough to buckle his knees. The shepherd bounded onward, weaving through invisible landmarks only he could sense. Twice Daniel nearly fell, his boots sinking into hidden ditches, but Shadow circled back, shoving against his thigh until he steadied again. It was as if the dog refused to let him collapse. Through the storm, Daniel thought he saw it, the faint glow of light, pulsing red against the white. A beacon. The firehouse. His chest ached with hope. "Almost there," he whispered to Emily, kissing the top of her head. "Do you see it? That's home." Her eyelids fluttered, and for the first time, he thought he saw a faint nod. The storm howled louder, furious at losing its prey. Snow lashed his face, his legs buckled, but Daniel pushed on, fueled by the image of Mira waiting inside, by the steady bark of Shadow cutting through the white. The firehouse grew clearer, solid against the storm, its floodlights piercing the night. Salvation. And Daniel knew, if his legs gave out now, Shadow would still lead Emily to safety. The dog had already proven he would go where no human dared. But Daniel wasn't going to fall. Not yet. Not when they were this close. The beacon grew brighter with every agonizing step, a pulsing red glow that cut through the blizzard like a heartbeat. Daniel's chest tightened at the sight. Hope was dangerous in storms like this. It could fuel you, but it could also break you if it slipped away. He gritted his teeth, shifted Emily higher against his chest, and kept his eyes fixed on that light. Emily stirred faintly, her small fingers twitching against his jacket. He bent his head, whispering into her damp hair, his voice steady though his body screamed with fatigue. "We're almost there. Just a little further, sweetheart. Shadow's leading us home." Shadow barked ahead, sharp and urgent, his body cutting through the white like an arrow. Every few paces, he glanced back, his eyes glowing in the reflection of Daniel's flashlight, his tail stiff with determination. He wasn't just guiding, he was commanding them forward. The wind howled, the snow lashed, but the rhythm of survival carried them on, Shadow leading, Daniel carrying, Emily breathing. One mission, one fragile thread of life tying them together. Then came the sound, a voice, faint through the gale. "Over here. Do you see them?" Daniel's head snapped up. Shapes moved in the white, lantern beams stabbing through the storm. Rescuers. He tried to shout, but his throat was raw, his voice torn by the cold. What came out was a broken rasp. "Here. Child alive." Shadow's bark pierced the storm, louder than any human voice. The rescuers heard that. Lights swung toward them, figures surged closer, skis and snowshoes crunching against the frozen ground. "We see you. Hold on." Relief surged through Daniel so fiercely it almost buckled his knees. He stumbled, his boots sinking deep, nearly sending him sprawling. Emily whimpered as the jolt shook her, her head lolling dangerously. "No," Daniel hissed, forcing himself upright again. "Not now. Not when we're this close." Shadow circled back instantly, pressing against his leg, steadying him with the weight of his body. Daniel leaned into him, drawing strength from the shepherd's presence. Together, they forced the last few steps toward the rescuers. The first medic reached them, a man in a red parka with goggles frosted over. He crouched immediately, hands outstretched. "Give her to me, we'll get her inside." For a moment, Daniel hesitated, his arms tightening around Emily. Hours of carrying her through death's teeth had forged a bond too deep to release easily. But then he saw her lips, blue, trembling, and he knew. She needed more than he could give. He handed her over, his voice rough. "She's alive. Keep her warm. Don't let her slip." The medic nodded firmly, wrapping Emily in a thermal blanket, barking orders over his shoulder. "Oxygen. Heat packs. Clear a path." Shadow pressed in close, eyes locked on Emily as she was lifted onto a sled. His body quivered, his fur bristling, as if he might leap after her if anyone dared separate them. Daniel placed a hand on his back, whispering, "Easy, boy. We're with her. We don't leave her." The rescuers moved fast, pulling the sled through the snow toward the firehouse that loomed now just yards away, its floodlights cutting golden beams through the storm. Daniel staggered alongside, his legs trembling with every step, but he refused to fall behind. Shadow matched pace with the sled, his eyes never leaving Emily's pale face. The storm screamed one last fury as if enraged at losing its prey, the wind slamming into them with a force that nearly tore Daniel off his feet. But ahead, the firehouse doors swung open, warmth spilling out like a promise. They had made it. For the first time since the ice broke, Daniel allowed himself to believe survival was more than a dream. The firehouse doors slammed shut with a heavy thud, shutting out the storm's roar. For the first time since the ice shattered, Daniel felt warmth, not comfort, not safety yet, but the raw heat of generators, floodlights, and bodies moving fast. The air was thick with urgency, every corner alive with the sound of voices barking orders, the scrape of boots on concrete, and the hiss of portable heaters. Medics rushed Emily to a cot near the largest heater, their hands moving in sharp, practiced rhythm. Blankets unfurled, heat packs slapped into place, oxygen mask fitted over her small face. Her chest rose in shallow stutters beneath the fogging plastic, and Daniel's own breath caught with every pause between them. He tried to step closer, but someone pressed a hand against his chest. You need treatment too, your lips are blue, your hands. Daniel shook them off, voice raw but commanding. I'll wait. She goes first. Shadow shoved past the crowd without hesitation, leaping onto the platform beside Emily. His wet fur dripped onto the cot, his body steaming as it met the heat, but no one dared pull him away. His muzzle pressed to Emily's cheek, his ears twitching with every sound she made. He growled low when a medic leaned too close without Daniel nearby, his amber eyes daring anyone to separate him from the child. Let him stay, Daniel rasped. His tone brokered no argument. The medics exchanged glances, then nodded. As long as he doesn't interfere. Shadow didn't interfere. He curled against Emily's side, chest pressed to hers, as if willing his steady heartbeat into her fragile body. His tail brushed against her leg, slow and rhythmic, a signal of reassurance only she could feel. Daniel sank down on a crate nearby, elbows braced on his knees, his entire body trembling from exhaustion. His uniform clung to him like ice, his skin burned with frostbite, but none of it mattered. His eyes stayed locked on Emily. Minutes dragged like hours. Medics called out numbers, pulse weak but steady. Temp rising. Keep the oxygen flowing. Their words were clinical, but Daniel heard what they didn't say. The fight was still on, and it could go either way. He rubbed his hands over his face, dragging in a shaky breath. Myra's voice echoed in his mind, desperate and breaking, bring her back. He had promised. And promises, to Daniel, weren't words. They were missions. Emily stirred faintly, a muffled whimper slipping past the mask. Her small hand twitched, searching, until it found Shadow's fur. Her fingers curled weakly, clutching as though she knew the shepherd had never let go. Shadow responded with a low rumble, his eyes softening, his head lowering until his muzzle brushed her hand. Daniel's throat tightened. He leaned forward, whispering hoarsely. That's it, kiddo. You hold on. You've got Shadow. You've got me. We're not letting you go. A medic glanced at him. She's a fighter. Most kids wouldn't have lasted 10 minutes in that water. Daniel's gaze flicked to Shadow. She didn't last 10 minutes alone. The shepherd's tail thumped once, deliberate, as if in agreement. The firehouse hummed with controlled chaos around them, but for Daniel, the world narrowed to that cot, Emily's shallow breaths, Shadow's steady vigil, the faint rise of color in her cheeks. Hope was a dangerous thing in storms, but in that moment, he allowed it to flicker in his chest. For the first time since the ice cracked, Daniel felt something other than desperation. He felt belief. The night stretched on, long and unrelenting, though the blizzard outside had begun to ease. The firehouse was still alive with activity, medics moving from cot to cot, generators humming, and the distant murmur of rescuers coordinating over radios. But around Emily, a bubble of stillness formed, held in place by a soldier, a child, and a dog. Shadow refused to leave. The shepherd lay curled against Emily's side, chest rising and falling in time with hers, his muzzle brushing her hand every few seconds. Each twitch, each small sigh from her, made him press closer. His amber eyes, alert even in sleep, never wavered. It was a vigilance born of instinct, but it carried something more, loyalty, fearlessness, and an unbreakable bond. Daniel sat slumped against a wall nearby, boots and uniform soaked, fingers numb, teeth chattering under the lingering cold. His entire body screamed with fatigue. He hadn't slept in hours, hadn't eaten, hadn't even blinked properly since the ice had cracked. Yet he couldn't tear his eyes from Emily, couldn't stop checking her breathing, couldn't stop being the guard beside the guard. Minutes stretched into hours. Medics whispered to one another, noting Emily's pulse stabilizing, her temperature slowly climbing. She's going to make it, one said. But Daniel didn't dare celebrate. Not yet. The storm had taken too many, too fast. Emily stirred, murmuring something broken and muffled. Daniel bent close, catching the whisper, "Shadow." His throat tightened. The little girl had recognized her protector. Daniel's fingers dug into his knees as he watched Shadow nudge her hand gently, ensuring she stayed curled against him, safe and warm. It was more than devotion, it was survival instinct intertwined with love. Daniel exhaled, a shuddering, exhausted sigh, and leaned his forehead against his knees. He had fought wars in foreign lands, faced death in countless forms, but nothing had ever gripped him like this: a child, a storm, and a dog who refused to fail. His entire being was locked in a delicate balance between hope and fear. Around them, the firehouse hummed with life. The distant storm still lashed the windows, and wind rattled the doors, but in this corner, all was still. Daniel let himself notice the quiet warmth of the heater, the soft whir of machinery, and the faint scent of smoke and blankets. It was a temporary reprieve, but it was enough to remind him that survival wasn't impossible. Emily's fingers twitched again, clinging into Shadow's fur. The shepherd exhaled a deep, low rumble, a sound that resonated with safety, a reassurance that life would continue, even if fragile. Daniel reached down, brushing his fingers along Shadow's back, feeling the wet fur and warmth that seemed to radiate hope into the freezing air. He allowed himself one long, shaky breath. One victory in a night that had tested everything he thought he could endure. Hours later, Emily stirred again, this time stronger. Her eyelids lifted slowly, her gaze flickering across the firehouse, and she whispered, fragile but coherent, "Mom." Daniel's throat tightened. Shadow's ears flicked, eyes bright, as he pressed closer to the girl, tail thumping once, a soft, steady beat that spoke louder than words. Emily's recognition, Daniel realized, was the bridge from terror to hope. And as he watched her clutch the dog's fur with fragile determination, he allowed himself the smallest release of emotion, relief. The storm may have shattered the ice, the world may have threatened to swallow them, but together, they had endured. The vigil wasn't over, not entirely, but the first chapter of survival had been written in wet fur, icy breath, and unwavering loyalty. The storm had spent its fury by morning, leaving Miller's Creek in an eerie calm. Snow still fell lightly, dusting rooftops and streets in glittering frost, but the howl of the blizzard had been replaced by a hushed silence that felt almost sacred. The world outside was frozen, sparkling, quiet, and safe enough for the first time in hours. Inside the firehouse, the atmosphere was charged with relief. The generator hummed, heaters radiated warmth, and medics moved in precise, urgent motions. Yet near the largest cot, everything else melted away for Daniel. He was focused entirely on Emily and the dog that had saved her life. Emily's eyelids fluttered. Her small chest rose and fell slowly but steadily, each breath more confident than the last. Her fingers, still pale and trembling, clutched Shadow's fur. The shepherd pressed closer to her side, chest rising in sync with hers, refusing to release the tether of life he had maintained all night. Daniel slumped on the edge of a crate nearby, soaked and exhausted, boots frozen to the floor, body aching with frostbite and fatigue. His muscles burned as if he had run through a fire, and his lungs ached from the bitter air and adrenaline. Yet none of it mattered. Every second Emily drew a breath was a victory. Every tiny twitch of her fingers was proof. She stirred again, lifting her head weakly, and her lips parted. "Shadow," she whispered, her voice fragile but unmistakable. The shepherd's ears twitched. His tail thumped once against the cot, deliberate and steady. Daniel allowed himself a small exhale. Emily recognized her guardian, her anchor in the storm. The bond had endured, unbroken by ice, cold, or fear. Daniel's thoughts went to Mira, the mother who had been waiting helplessly while the blizzard raged. Her face flashed in his mind, eyes wide with worry. He whispered into Emily's hair, "Your mom's coming. You've got to hold on just a little longer." Outside, the faint glow of the sun struggled through clouds, painting the snow in pale gold and purple hues. Inside, The firehouse was alive with action, medics adjusting oxygen masks, adding warmth, monitoring vitals. But around Emily, time seemed to slow. Shadow refused to move, Daniel refused to leave, and for the first time since the ice broke, there was a sense of fragile peace. Minutes passed like hours. Then the doors swung open, and Mira burst in, her face pale with fatigue but alight with hope the moment she saw Emily. "Emily," she cried, voice breaking as she rushed to the cot. Her hands trembled as she cupped her daughter's face, pressing kisses to her cheeks and forehead. Tears streamed freely down her face. Thank God you're alive." Emily weakly lifted her arms and allowed herself to be pulled into her mother's embrace. Shadow pressed against her side, refusing to release his vigil even as the mother and child reunited. Daniel stepped back, watching, chest tight, letting Myra's sobs fill the room. "Daniel," Mira finally said, turning to him with gratitude shining through tears. "You, and Shadow, you saved her." Daniel shook his head, his own voice hoarse. "Shadow found her first. He never left." The shepherd's tail thumped once more, eyes locking on Emily, amber and alert even now. Daniel reached down, stroking Shadow's fur, whispering, "Good boy. You've earned some rest, but not yet." Shadow leaned into his touch, settling back into his protective stance. Outside, the world had been quieted by the storm, frozen and sparkling in the early light. Inside, the firehouse radiated warmth and safety. For the first time, Daniel allowed himself to feel relief fully. They had survived. Emily had survived. And Shadow, unflinching and loyal, had ensured it. The storm had claimed its fury, but it had not claimed them. Life had been preserved by courage, by loyalty, and by a bond stronger than ice, fear, or darkness. The firehouse had settled into a calm rhythm by now. Generators hummed, heaters radiated warmth, and the distant murmur of medics moving among cots filled the space with a steady heartbeat. Yet around Emily, time seemed suspended. Daniel watched every shallow rise of her chest, every faint twitch of her fingers, every shiver that ran through her small body. Shadow refused to move. The shepherd lay curled tightly against Emily's side, his head resting near her tiny hands, amber eyes scanning the room for threats even though the storm outside had long passed. His body heat flowed into her, mixing with the blankets and heaters, creating a fragile cocoon of warmth that no human could replicate. Daniel slumped on a crate nearby, legs stretched out, body trembling with exhaustion. His uniform clung to him, soaked through and stiff with ice that had formed overnight. His arms ached, his back burned, and his lungs still stung from the cold and exertion, but he didn't care. He couldn't leave Emily's side, not yet, not until he was certain she would wake fully, steady, and alive. Minutes crawled by. Emily's breathing steadied slightly, her lips losing some of their purple tint. Her eyelids fluttered as she stirred, weakly lifting her hand to clutch Shadow's fur. The dog responded instantly, pressing closer, ensuring that she remained snug and secure, his eyes never leaving Daniel. Daniel's throat tightened. He leaned forward, brushing his fingers along Shadow's wet fur, feeling the warmth and loyalty that had guided them through the storm. "You've kept her safe," he whispered, voice raw. "I couldn't have done it without you." Emily's head lifted slightly. Her eyes, still unfocused, found the dog first. "Shadow," she murmured, a faint but unmistakable recognition. The sound broke something in Daniel. He swallowed hard, his own exhaustion giving way to relief so deep it threatened to overwhelm him. Shadow's tail thumped once, a quiet, measured thump, almost like a heartbeat marking victory. Daniel looked around the firehouse. Medics were busy but gave the trio a wide berth, respecting the bond that had saved a life. He allowed himself to notice the warmth of the heater, the faint smell of blankets, and the soft murmur of human voices, a stark contrast to the terror of the ice and blizzard outside. Emily shifted slightly, bringing her small hand closer to Shadow. The dog nudged her palm gently with his muzzle, and she let out a soft sigh of comfort. Daniel's chest tightened further. This was what survival felt like, fragile, precious, and tied together by loyalty stronger than fear. Hours passed. Shadow remained vigilant, pressing against her side, not daring to close his eyes for more than a few seconds at a time. Daniel finally leaned back, letting himself relax just slightly, and allowed a long, shuddering breath to escape. The storm had tried to claim them. The ice had betrayed, the water had dragged, the night had threatened. But here they were, alive, together, and whole. The soldier, the child, and the dog who had refused to leave her side. Daniel whispered softly to Shadow, "We made it. You did it. You've earned your rest." The dog shifted slightly, but didn't leave her side. His duty was not done until Emily was fully safe, fully awake, and secure. And in that quiet vigil, Daniel allowed himself to hope. For the first time, he believed that they had truly survived the night. Dawn crept over Miller's Creek, pale gold and muted purple streaking the snow-laden sky. The blizzard had finally relented, leaving a landscape of sparkling frost and frozen streets. The world outside was still, pristine, and eerily calm, but inside the firehouse, warmth and life prevailed. Emily stirred, slowly lifting her head, eyelids heavy but opening to the glow of the heaters and floodlights. Her chest rose steadily now, each breath a small victory. Her fingers, pale but clutching firmly, found Shadow's soaked fur once more. The shepherd pressed close, head resting against her side, eyes amber and alert even in the soft morning light. Daniel slumped on a crate nearby, utterly exhausted. His body ached from the night's ordeal, frostbitten fingers, burning muscles, and numbed legs reminded him of the battle they had endured. Yet he didn't move, he couldn't. His eyes were locked on Emily, watching the fragile rise and fall of her chest, counting each breath like a lifeline. Then the firehouse doors burst open, and Mira appeared, face pale but eyes blazing with hope. She ran toward the cot, tears streaking her face. "Emily," she cried, voice raw, almost breaking. She dropped to her knees beside her daughter, cupping her face in her hands, pressing kisses to her forehead and cheeks. Thank God you're alive." Emily weakly raised her arms, letting herself be pulled into her mother's embrace. Shadow pressed close, refusing to relinquish his vigil, body curling protectively around her even as she clung to Mira. Daniel allowed himself a small, shaky smile, feeling the weight of relief he had carried through the frozen night. Mira looked up at Daniel, eyes bright with gratitude. "You, and Shadow, you saved her. You brought her back." Daniel shook his head, voice hoarse from exhaustion and emotion. "Shadow found her first. He never left her." The shepherd thumped his tail once, a deliberate beat of affirmation. Daniel reached down, brushing the wet fur, whispering, "Good boy. You've earned your rest, but don't even think of leaving her yet." Shadow leaned into the touch, settling back with Emily still pressed close. Outside, the sun continued its rise, casting long shadows across the snow. The streets were quiet, a town paused under ice and frost, but inside the firehouse, life thrummed with quiet celebration. Emily was alive. Shadow had kept his promise. Daniel's heart, heavy with hours of fear, finally loosened, letting relief and gratitude wash through him. The storm had attempted to erase hope, to pull life into the icy water and snow, but loyalty, courage, and determination had prevailed. Daniel watched mother, daughter, and dog together, each breathing, each alive, each tethered to one another by bonds forged stronger than fear. Shadow rested at last, head low, eyes softening but still keeping watch. Emily's fingers grazed his fur, a silent acknowledgement of the guardian who had refused to abandon her. Mira pressed Emily close, whispering promises of safety and warmth, and Daniel let himself lean back against the crate, chest rising and falling in time with his own breaths, finally allowing the exhaustion to settle into relief. The ice had broken. The storm had raged. Darkness had threatened. But loyalty had conquered all. In the soft, golden morning light, with the storm behind them and life before them, Daniel, Emily, and Shadow had survived. Together.